Hello, my name's Brian James. I'm up here in sunny Cumbria, and on the other end of the line is my sis, Bev Thorogood. Hi, Bev. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you.
I think this is episode 5, if I'm not mistaken, in our Take Better Photos.
I think it is.
It is. Well, welcome everybody to this one. We've done the techie side to death, I think, up to now. So I want to take a bit of a diversion, if I can, and go on to what makes the photograph a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. How does that sound to you?
Sounds good. I'm still getting my head around the techie stuff, but I think other than getting out and doing it and practicing and actually getting it embedded in my brain, there's not much more I can do other than just learning it.
I think the problem is well, we get so hung up over the techie side because a camera is quite a technical thing, especially these days. When I first started in photography, my first SLR was a thing called a Zenit E. I got it off my dad. So if you remember, it was the size of it was built like a brick and the size of a Russian tank because it was a Russian camera. And it was huge, but it was all manual. You turned the focus, you turned the speed, you turned the aperture, you pressed the button, and it took the photo. Things have come on so much where digital cameras now aren't a camera, they're a computer, which just happens to control a lens and put an image onto a TV screen. And I think that's caused an awful lot of ease in what we get insofar as the cleverness, but I think it's caused a lot of confusion insofar as the techie side. I don't know what you feel about that, but I certainly have felt that when I got into digital.
I've always found it complicated. The idea of the numbers has always scared me. The idea of ISOs and f-stops and all of the stuff that we've been talking about has always scared me. But I have realized this, so the older I've got, that sometimes you just have to break the complicated down into smaller chunks until you get them so small that they stick, and then you can start to build them out again. So yes, it is complicated until you start to break it down into those smaller bits, which is what you're doing for me, which is really helping. But yes, it is a bit daunting.
Well, let's build on that, because what I really want to be doing in this series isn't teaching you how the camera works at the nth degree of technology. I want to be actually doing what it says on the box, taking better photographs. Now, I sent you a challenge last time, didn't I, to go out and take some photographs, something which you enjoyed, which would you could bring to it, and not bring every photograph, you could shoot hundreds, but bring a selection. And tell me some of the story behind those. And I said I was just going to do something of the same ilk. And I said to do something of a historical theme. Now, that was a very open mandate there. So what could be historical? Could be a building, it could be a place, it could be an old pair of shoes, because it depends what you class as historical. Did you manage to get anything done?
I did a couple. Do you want me to share them?
Yeah, whenever you're ready. Let's have a look at them.
So I think I've got 8, so we'll plough through them. I don't want to spend ages on them. So you wanted something historic, and to be honest, because we're in lockdown, I'm in South Lincolnshire. All the historic stuff is outside really of my travel to areas. But I did remember that in one of the villages close by to us, they've got some old stocks. Now, I don't know whether they're authentic, old, or if they're kind of a folly. But I took a load. Now, I did take lots. I took probably 40 shots of this little stocks. And I've just been sort of going through and picking out some. So on the thumbnail size, I couldn't really see which one I was picking. And I haven't done anything with this. So I know we're talking about sort of composition and things. So I had a slight difficulty in that I was on a main road, as you can see. And I had this blooming awful post box and telephone box, which initially I really didn't like. And then I started to think, well, actually, telephone boxes are pretty historic now because nobody really uses them. And we also had this play park in the background, which was a bit annoying because I couldn't actually do anything about that. And then I've got this blooming awful bin, but it's quite dark, so you can't really see it. But I quite like the fact you had the old stocks in the front of the photograph and the church in the background. But I haven't done anything. I think if I was going to do, if I in sort of post messing around with it, I'd have got rid of the road, probably got rid of the telephone box, And if there was a way to do it, I'd probably try and get rid of the people. So yes, there you go. But I was struggling a little bit to find anything that I thought was historic.
Okay, a few comments if I can make on that. When I first saw it, and this is where the storytelling comes in. This is why I like the idea of a story. And the beauty of a photograph is that you create what you consider the story. It's then what other people read into it themselves. Now, I immediately thought when I saw this, because I haven't seen any of your photographs yet, these are all new to me. So I immediately thought, before you even said anything, that the highlight of this was to try and show the old and the new, the old style building on the left, with contrasting with the bright red of the post box and the telephone box. So I actually saw that as being part of the story. So it's interesting that the viewpoints change. I take what you're saying about the bits and pieces in the background, the play area and things. There's a few things you can do around that. Post-production is ideal. You can take an awful lot of post-production. I wouldn't change the road, except to maybe get rid of the white lines. I think the road actually makes a nice break point. But the white lines do tend to be a bit distracting. So you can get rid of those fairly easily in post-production. One of the other things you could do, and it's an interesting thing that you said about the fact that there was a road in the way, you didn't want to get run over. But if you were to take it further around to your left in that shot, so you go closer to that curve on the left and then look further perhaps down, so that the the telephone box and post box would be more behind and just popping through. So you a more acute angle, you would get a totally different shot again. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, you would have to experiment with as you do it. But the beauty of it is that there's lots of alternatives you can do on this. Again, with the bin, that can be taken out in post-production. When you see you took about 40 shots, though, you'll have probably honed in on this one as being one that particularly caught the eye. What I would suggest, and I suggest this to anybody who's watching this video as well, look at the other 39 and find out, rather than find out what's good about this one, try and work out what was bad about them. What put you off those ones?
I'm not convinced that this is my favorite one. It's just, it was one that I picked from the thumbnails that were quite small. So I need to really go back through and see if there's something that's composed in a better way, because some of them, I was on the other side of the road, much closer to the stocks. And I didn't have all of the children and everything, but then I didn't have the sky or the church in the background either. And then there were some others that I took where I was virtually opposite the telephone box, looking sort of from looking at this from at the right hand side, looking at the stocks, which of course gave a completely different view, much more of the play park behind. So I chose this one because I wanted to choose one in a hurry, but I wouldn't say this is necessarily the one with the best, or well, it's not a very good composition, but the one with the best of the bunch. But
it's given pointers, and I love the fact that you picked up, as I say, I picked up on the old and new. You picked up on the fact that the post box and the telephone box themselves are historic. So again, it's this storytelling. Yeah, we could go into things. I'm going to try and avoid the technical side too much on this. Exposure is maybe a little bit underexposed, or the shadows are a little bit underexposed, but that can be brought out in post-production as well. Overall, though, I think compared to some of the first photographs you were taken before we started this series, you probably have a better understanding as to how you've come to this point of having that picture there. Would you say so?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the next one, because that's great. It's a good start, that.
Okay, so yes, this is a much closer one. What was difficult was the fact that the light was in a really funny place, because it was sort of so I've got this big lump of light here, and then all of this is very dark, and of course I've lobbed the top of the hat.
Did you notice that? Did you notice that at the time?
No, I didn't.
No, you never do. It's great.
No. So that kind of gives you an idea of, as I say, I don't know how old it is. I don't know if it's actually old or if it's pretend old. That was something I was trying to mess around with, depth of field, and I realized that one is out of focus. but that one was much more in focus.
So tell me about, we'll take this one. Tell me what you mean by depth of field. I could it in mine, but obviously I've tried to impart what I know. You tell me what you perceive as the depth of field in that, and why.
Well, what I had was, I think, a short depth of field, so that what I could see close up was in focus, but the rest of it more sort of muted in the background, which is what I was wanting, but I don't know if I've got the terminology wrong.
Now, how did you achieve that?
Oh gosh, right. So I had the f-stop. I think I was on aperture priority, if I remember rightly. And I had the f-stop very, very low.
Yeah, very low f-stop. If you right click on that and go to the properties, let's have a look and see what it, file information. Let's see what it says about the f-stop. Well, we're on 1,000th of a second, which is great. And f-stop of, is that f4? At 15 millimeter.
f4, 15 millimeter.
So we've got a fairly wide angle. We've got f4, which is about the lowest that your camera is going to go down to on that lens that you've got, which is great. It's a fairly high shutter speed because of lots of light in, because we've got a very open aperture. And as you say, that creates a very shallow depth of field. In other words, the distance at its in focus, because when you got something in focus, you got a little bit in front and behind, which is in focus as well. And you should say it's very, very shallow. It's not a great distance between being in focus, which, because you got the plant focused in the right place, everything behind it goes into that nice soft focus. Absolutely perfect. Just what you want to achieve. And the reason that you got it there is exactly as you said. That's great. So
I would rather this one wasn't here. I should have perhaps turned my body slightly to the left and taken it there, so I didn't have that other plant there, because I think it detracts. Or
move the plant. I took some photographs the other day where there was a beautiful shot and just a branch of a tree in the way. So I ended up standing there with one arm pushing the tree out, the branch of the tree out the way while I took the shot with my left hand. But yeah, absolutely ideal. And it shows that what we have discussed technically has gone in there. Yeah. We now have an understanding why, and it's great. And you're spot on with it.
I would have liked to have made the fence in the background even more blurred. So it was because I feel as if the fence is a little bit too prominent. And if it was a little bit more blurred, it would give this sort of, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, you possibly can't. Yes. So I like this sort of halfway round, this sort of, it's the fence line and this hedge line sort of makes a bit of a semicircle, a very slight arc. And I think I quite like that. It sort of breaks the photograph in two. And because the head of the plant sits just above it, I quite like the way that's sort of composed. But I think because the fence is still clear as to what it is, it detracts, it distracts the eye. So I don't know how to have done that.
This is where we have some of the issues insofar as why you can spend thousands on a camera system. To go onto that, you really need a lens which is going to have a larger aperture, which is a smaller f-stop number. Now, the trouble, that's called the speed of the lens. A fast lens has very, very small numbers and will let a lot of light through. The problem with that is the expense goes up exponentially. So to try and get to the next level of zoom from the lens that you've got, which is something like an f3.5 to f5.6, and at 15 millimeters that you had it selected there, you are talking about f4 being the maximum you'll go to. They will cost a few £100. If you want to go to the next level of zoom, which will take you to about f2.8 fully open, you're talking well over £1,000.
Okay, I'll live with the fence.
However, there is another thing you could have done on that, and this is where the technical side does come in insofar as if you'd zoomed in somewhat and used more of a telephoto, it would have altered the angle of view, which would have probably spoiled the shot that you've got as well there. So we've got to take that into consideration. But by going more telephoto on the plant itself, you will find that again, at a very open aperture, the background will become more blurred. But the bad point of that is you don't have the width of view. You don't have that width between left and right. So there are ways you can get a more blurry background than a lens you've got, but unfortunately, it then comes into the fact that you've got other payoffs, other compromises.
One of the things I do like about this, and this might sound a little bit weird or a bit odd, but it feels as if that plant is sort of, because it's slightly offset to the left, but moving into the center, it feels as if it's moving into the center and moving away. I feel as if I want to kind of follow it towards, I'm pointing at the screen and you can't see, towards where the fence ends and the hedge starts. It feels like it's falling towards that, and it feels like it's taken me towards that point in the distance.
Yeah, there is another thing which we'll cover in a later video, which are some of the rules. You will find an awful lot of people talk about rules in photography, the rule of thirds, converging lines, all these sort of things. They are ideal because they are meant to be broken. The rules are meant to be broken, but I tend to use the rule of thirds analogy quite a lot, which is if you were to put two vertical lines and divide the screen into three parts vertically, the picture into three parts vertically, and do the same thing horizontally, two horizontal lines to make a grid across the screen, and divide it up into thirds that way. That is a good guideline as to what we like eyes. We don't, yeah, that sort of thing. Perfect. And you probably find in your camera you have the ability to put grid lines on. Now, if you,
is that about a third?
That's close enough. If you do the top horizontal one,
say again,
and do a horizontal one front
again in thirds.
About there.
Yeah, they're really not thirds, are they?
They're not thirds, but they're close enough, because it doesn't have to be exact. And this is the beauty with this. It doesn't have to be exact. Can you see where the head of the flower lies? Near enough in an interjection of thirds. It's a third of the way down and a third of the way to the left. Close enough. The fence, where the fence first starts on the right-hand side, is about a third of the way up, and it leads you in. So this whole idea of using thirds, the mind likes things divided into three. We like threes for some reason as people. I don't know if you've noticed all the sort of in the UK, all the government lines about the coronavirus have all been three items. You know, wash your hands, keep space, protect the NHS, all that sort of thing. We like the idea of working in threes, and our eye naturally gravitates to something which sits in that 1/3 category. It doesn't have to be exact, but by being off center, it's probably a little bit more attractive than if it was centered. So great, we'll come into that later video, but that's something of there. Now, because you naturally feel that way, you do tend to do it without thinking about it. You don't see it as a rule. You just naturally think, well, it looks quite nice. So keep that in mind. That's probably good. And it's sitting there near enough on that 1/3 division on the left and the top. Okay, next picture. Okay,
there we go. There we go. Again, this was just me playing around with depth of field. I wanted to try and get this bright. I wanted the bright yellow. I don't even know what it is, to be honest. It looks like it almost looks like a something on the bush. I don't think it is the actual bush. I think it's like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a moss, like a lichen sort of thing, yeah. But I wanted that to be quite bright and vibrant in the forefront, with everything a little bit hazy in the background. Which you've achieved, absolutely achieved. What do you think of the photograph itself? Oh, I don't like it. It's too messy. It doesn't draw your eye to anything. Yeah, and that's probably my opinion on that one as well. So, yeah. We've proved that we can do the techie side, but it doesn't draw the eye and it doesn't have anything appealing to it. And this is where, again, this story comes in. What's it trying to portray? But is that one you would particularly show other people? What, the one that I've just... The previous one? Yeah, no, not at all. However, can I blow my own trumpet? I absolutely love this. And I love it because this sort of forms a bit of a heart. Oh, yeah. And I saw this sort of heart reflected. And I really liked it, that it was sort of halfway across. It kind of doesn't do your rule of thirds, does it? It's halfway across. Well, yes, it does. It's on the center line vertically. But where is that heart from a horizontal point of view?
nicely on the left-hand third.
Right, yes. Yeah.
So you
I
split
don't
the screen top to bottom is half and half, but where the heart is near enough on that vertical third line, if you like. So it's there is still that 1/3 part in there.
what I would want to do in post, I think, is lift some of the colours. It wasn't a particularly bright day. And a lot of these colours were quite vibrant, but I've not captured it.
Well, I think some of that will come out in post-production, because again, you're shooting these on RAW, aren't you?
I am, but this is the JPEG.
This is the
so
JPEG
my
version.
camera's set to do both.
And what do you have do you know what you have the style on? Is it just on natural or I enhance, or so is it different cameras have different styles? So it's probably just on a natural, a basic
I think
style.
it's just, I haven't fiddled with any of the styles. I don't know if it's got that built in.
Yeah, it's probably just on the straightforward style. So it's not really doing anything much to alter the photograph in its own production. There's all sorts you can do on this post-production wise to really bring the colors out, to really get it to stand out. But as you said at the beginning, you haven't done any of the altering, which is an important fact on this. Again, from my point of view, I see what you mean by the heart. I think it's great. I think the use of reflections are fantastic. And again, it's another one of these things about using reflections to your advantage. If that water had been particularly rough, it wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have happened.
It's interesting you say that, because I had to come back to it, because just as I was about to take it, a bird landed on the water and it messed up all the water. So we carried on our walk, and I got it on the way back.
Guaranteed you're going to get something like that. I've got something a little bit later to show you, which happened in a similar sort of vein. I did say about the rule of thirds. Put two horizontal lines across for me there, Bev. Would you just quickly at the 1/3 points?
Horizontal.
Yeah. Near enough 1/3. That'll do for that. Close enough. Don't have to be exact. And do another one at the bottom. And isn't that strange? The center point of our trees and the center, near enough the center point of the reflection of the trees, are sitting on the 1/3. So you've naturally actually used thirds, although it doesn't sort of stand out and saying that. You've actually got 1/3 split. You've also got a horizontal split, which you've chosen on the heart part, which I think is right. It's almost at the center where the land meets the shore. So you've actually got rule of thirds being used there. And if you put a vertical line across there where the heart is, about 1/3 point. Our main point, near enough there, a little bit further over perhaps would have been okay, but it's, you know, we're close enough. The main focal point is round about the 1/3, and we've actually got the tree lines doing on the thirds as well. So this idea of rule of thirds, they say it's a rule, we don't have to have it, but what it does is it just naturally falls in with how we perceive things in life. We do tend to look at things in that, and by being on the thirds, it does tend to draw the eye in. I think it's a great photo. I think with a little bit of enhancement post-production, it'd be marvelous. And on post-production, you get an awful lot of people who will cower in, well, surely it should be right at the camera straight away. Well, not really, because in actual fact, when we see things with our eyes, we naturally post-produce them. Our brain takes the image that we see and alters it to what we really want it to be. The greens will be much greener, the reds will be incredibly red in our minds, where actually what the camera is doing, especially on a raw file, is showing you the truth. The truth isn't as vibrant as we think it is. And we do that because it goes back to, you know, the times when we were in the wild hunting for prey. We had to be able to work out and differentiate the contrasts on what we were trying to hunt or what was going to be trying to hunt us. So these things happen naturally inside our eyes. So things like Lightroom and what's the post-production stuff program you use? GIMP. It's a freeware, but
it's an open source.
It's an open source. Yeah. They're the sort of things which can do what your eye does naturally. One of the biggest problems that I've found with beginning photographers at the beginning of the journey is they get disappointed. If they're using normal cameras, say, well, I'm disappointed, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't have that wow factor. and it doesn't have the wow factor because it's actually accurate. And it's what we can do to make it wow afterwards, which is great. So I have no problem with post-production. I will use post-production quite happily. And I think that that's a great photo, which we'll probably come back to that. I may actually try and do that for a future episode and come back to this photo, and we'll put a little bit of post-production on and compare them, because I think it's an ideal photo for that. Great photo. Love the reason and love the story behind it. Excellent.
Okay. I've only got 2 left to show you. So this was one that, again, I think I must love reflections. It was just stunning. And I loved the fact that the reflection was, I mean, this is all reflection, obviously, in the water. And the fact that the tree, the origin of the tree, if you like, where the roots hit the water, is again, sort of halfway across. And I don't know why. It's not a particularly pretty photograph. I rather liked the way it was reflected.
And sometimes that's the whole thing. It doesn't have to be a pretty photograph or a technical photograph. If it appeals, if you enjoy it, if you like it, if it stirs something in your mind, then it's a good photograph.
Okay, going with the story, when we passed this and I photographed it, my husband and I were out walking. And the story behind it was, how on earth is that tree surviving in the water? You'd think it was just after we'd had all of the snow, and it had and a lot of rain, and there shouldn't be a puddle there. It looks like it's a bit of a pond. There shouldn't be anything there. It's a dip in the ground that was waterlogged. And we were talking, and like, how on earth is it surviving? It's like if you leave a plant in water and it gets waterlogged, it dies. And we were sort of talking about how hardy trees are, that they can survive. So that was kind of the story, if you like, behind it.
I've done a video recently on a place called Torkin Tarn, which is a small water just not far away from where I am, about 65 acres of inland lake, a glacial lake. And one of the things I say in there is the trees. There are so many trees which have fallen into the water. You thrive, even though, as you say, they shouldn't. The fascinating things, I have a fascination for taking photographs of trees. I think they're incredible things, because they're like fingerprints. There's not one the same as the next one. There's not one identical. So yeah, wonderful story on that. And again, that's the whole point for me of photography. It's told a story, and it's stirred an emotion. So it's great.
And then the final one, this was all about shutter speed, to try and get a fast shutter. I did take a car that I was very, very proud of, because I could see every spoke, if you like, in the alloys. I've somehow just lost the photograph between us sort of looking for them and starting the video. But this was a train moving at quite high speed. And
Can you bring the properties of that photograph up for me, Bev, as we talk, and just carry on? Tell me, what was your thought pattern behind this?
Well, I was just really looking for something. I was actually turned the other way, because behind me is a road. So I was waiting to take photographs of cars as they came past, so I could use play around with shutter speed. And then I heard a train in the background, and I sort of turned around, and it was just about to pass. So I did have my shutter on rapid shutters. What do you call it? Gosh, what's the word I'm looking for, Brian?
Repetition of frames per second. You had it on a...
Yeah. So instead of having to click, I click once, and it goes...
Yeah, so multiple shots.
What you used to have as a motor drive, I think they used to call it, or
used
something.
To be, on my very first Olympus, on my OM1, it was
like a cable with a button, if I remember rightly.
Well, it was a little block that fitted underneath and took it up to, I think it was 3 frames per second. Wow.
But the reason I had it on was because when I was trying to take the cars, by the time the car came, by the time I pressed the button, the car had gone by. So with the train, I heard it. So I turned around, and it was already on this sort of repetitive shutter. And actually what I did, I followed the train as I was. Yeah.
The term for that is you panned across.
Did I? Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I panned across. So I as it went past, I did And that's what I ended up with. And
That's a great description.
And that's what I ended up with. So I was quite pleased because everything is pretty much in focus.
So let's see the file information.
I mean, it's very dark here, of course, but
yep.
There we go.
So we had on a 400th of a second, is that?
Where am I looking?
On the left-hand side, shot 1/400th of a second at
yes.
f9, 29 millimeter. Yep, it's possibly on the slow. It's a medium sort of shutter speed, possibly on the slow side for that, or even for a car. But because you panned with the train, that actually also helps to freeze the motion, because relative to you, it's doing no speed because you're panning with it. So the relative speed becomes almost zero. What you would possibly find on that, especially if you use the slower shutter speed, the trees would then become blurred, but the train would be sharp. So great photos, great ideas behind it. But I think the important thing from that is you had an understanding. I take you were shooting on speed priority on that, or aperture priority?
Do you know what? I can't remember.
On something like that, you'd normally go to speed, because then you can dictate the speed rather than the camera.
I'm fairly certain it was on speed, because I did say to my husband, how do I know how fast I need to be? Because I had it on really, really, really fast, I think. And he said, you don't need it that fast.
No.
But I think I'm a definite all or nothing. I'm either, one extreme to the other. So I forget there's anything in between.
Well, again, like I said on one of the previous photos, don't be afraid to look at all the ones that you reject because they didn't work. Have a look at it. If one really doesn't work, sit down and analyze that. It's actually going to give you an awful lot more information than the really good shot, because the bad shot is going to show you what didn't work. And if you then analyze it, have a look at the properties like we just seen, the file properties, that's going to give you the ability to say, okay, then, oh, I was on a 60th of a second. Maybe that's why it's blurred, because Brian had told me to capture speed, to go a faster shutter speed. It could be that you saw that the train was in focus and you saw the trees were, you think, well, why are the trees out? It's still fairly slow shutter speed, but that can actually be, as I'll show you in a few moments, a positive. It depends what you want to do in it. It's having that knowledge to take the control. And that's the difference. But I think what we've demonstrated in this is that the 4 videos before this have had an effect, because we now have an understanding. We maybe haven't mastered it. And again, I'll go back to my fantastic car analogy. You learn to drive a car, you're looking down the gears at first. By the time you come to take a driving test, at least in the UK, you're competent to drive a car on the roads, but you're not a good driver. No. And then the next 20, 30, 40 years of experience is what makes you a good or a bad driver. You should be learning all the time. So when you first pass that test, you get the piece of paper and you've taken the learner plates off the car. That's when you actually start learning. At least that's what my dad used to tell both of us, isn't it? You start learning when you pass your test. And I think the same is true in photography. We've got those ground rules. We've got those understanding of the technical. We now need to put those into practice and take every little opportunity just to hone the skills, to smooth out the edges, and to make sure that we get it right until it becomes natural. Again, I've been trying to teach myself to play piano recently. I'm a guitarist and musician, but I've been teach myself piano, and until I get that muscle memory in my hands, everything seems difficult, especially the left hand technique on the bass notes. I found that incredibly hard. But I look back to just a couple of weeks ago and I realized I'm doing things I wouldn't even thought of then. The same thing happens in photography.
I tell you what I wasn't expecting, which you may relate to, but so you're a musician, you're a singer. You know that I don't like singing. I have a real lack of confidence around singing. A throwback to a comment a teacher made when I was about 10. But what I've noticed about the photography as well is that same feeling of being judged when I show my photographs is there. I need to kind of get over that and do it for fun, which is what my son's a musician as well, as you know, and the pair of you both say it's about enjoying it. It's not about worrying about being judged by it.
You have a podcast which you put out, and I'll try and find the right one. the link for it. If I can find it, I'll put it in the description below. But one of the ones, I walk the dog and I listen to your podcast. They're fascinating to listen to. And it was with one of your colleagues on a networking group. And we talking about imposter syndrome. And what you're describing literally is there. Oh, I'm not really a photographer. I'm going to get found out if I display these. Somebody's going to criticize me and say that I'm not good.
Yeah,
absolutely. We have to get past that. And it's a natural thing to do, but what we then do is we hone our skills. We just keep on going. We keep practicing. We don't give up. So don't worry about that. That's perfectly normal. And if you didn't do that, actually, you'd be rather arrogant and probably wouldn't produce the great shots. The arrogant people rarely do. They have too much self-belief to actually be self-critical. So I actually think that the self-critique is wonderful. I'm going to show you some photographs now. I'm going to quickly flip through because, again, what the brief was to do something historic.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. We didn't really worry what the historic was. I went to a place, I mentioned it before, Torquay, and it was a pretty rainy, horrible day. Now, these ones have had some post-production done on them, but these are, again, photographs. The brief was to do something which excited you, which, bring the photographs which you like to the screen. And just to give a little bit of a story why. Well, this to me was great. You can see a sort of pattern on the water. That's because rain was falling at that time. But we had the rain cloud overhead, and we had some nice we had some nice clear skies just visible in the distance. And that was causing a change in the color on the far shore. Now, there's a little boathouse in there, which has been used as a boathouse, but an art gallery and all sorts of things. And Torquay is one of those places. For me, it tells a story because it's a glacial lake. It's a kettle-bottomed lake, so it's really deep in the center. But it's somewhere where I've got lots of good memories. It's 2 miles away from my house. I go up there to walk, and I go up there to get some peace and quiet. So again, for that, to me, it's great. Does it follow any of those rule of thirds? No, I can't see anything which is particularly on a third. Most of it's pretty much a middle split on the thing. It's actually slightly off center now that I've seen it on a bigger screen. It's slightly tilted, but I like the colors. I like the reflection.
Sort of way, yeah.
It is slightly, which really annoys me when I see it. There are some things which trigger me and see my own photographs when it's slightly skew with. But basically, I put it up there because it was one which I thought, you know what, it was a horrible, horrible shoot. It was an awful day. It had been pouring down, and this was that little glimmer of hope which came through with the light. Would I display it to other people? Probably not. But it's something that I would quite happily have as a small print or just something as a background screen on my iPad, because it brings a bit of a smile on my face. So from that, most of these ones, the historic part of that is, as I say, it's a 10,000-year-old glacial lake. Again, the same place. We said about trees and the water. This is a view over the lake, but what I've done there, the trees there are fascinating. As I said earlier, I love the tree part of it. Slightly out of focus as it's close in, and the idea is that you look through the tree. It's using framing, and again, one of the techniques is to use things as a frame. So if you can find something to frame a shot, and I'm looking out over the lake, but I've got a lovely frame around there. You can see the roots and things. And to me, that's, again, just a pleasant shot. Is it something I would show to a lot of people? Probably not. But hey, the fact is, it's telling a bit of a story for me, and it makes me feel good. And I have actually shown it to other people on one of the videos I've done, and I've got some good responses. So
it's interesting. Without the frame, it would be a very bland photograph.
Absolutely,
yeah. But the trees create interest, don't they, in the front, and draw your eye in sort of inwards towards the centre of the lake.
They do, and there's just that nice bit of warmth coming through with the light. There's a cloud which you can just see it about between the frame and the top tree going off to the left. But what that's doing is putting a nice sort of amber colouring onto the water as well, which again just warms the shot up somewhat. We have a small station at Brampton where I live, and it used to have a line which went into the town, and again, same afternoon, it was pouring down the rain, absolutely bucketing down. Again, now this one has literally just been just for balance, but I would have got rid of the no smoking sign from the gate if it had been down to me a little bit more. Not a great shot, too busy, but it's a descriptive one. And if you put it into a collection of shots on its own, not a very good shot. Put it into a collection of shots where I walk across the bridge and I see things from different angles, which is what I was doing on this. I was doing it for a purpose, to shoot a video. It becomes meaningful. So sometimes the photograph itself doesn't have to be 100% standalone. If it's in a collection of photographs, which is going to be used to tell a story, for instance, stills for a video, sometimes you need is, it's almost what they'd call in the video world, in the film and video world, B-roll. It's that shot which fills in. And this is a good fill-in shot for there. I would still, as I say, get rid of things like the no smoking sign, but I actually like things like the decay. I've got a love of seeing decay on things and photographing that. So things like the decay on the paintwork and the way that the pattern there of the wood is as it's been weathered. On the same vein, a little bit more detail. Now this is more to show the structure of it, again, because it's a series of them, but there are leading lines in there. You've got it's a detailed photograph rather than necessarily a stand back and admire. And again, from a functional point of view. And again, because it was a story which I'm putting together about Brampton Junction, it's about 2 miles outside of Brampton. So how come we have a railway station which is nowhere near the town? Well, there actually used to be one in the town, and what we're standing on the minute, that muddy tract, is the line, the branch line, which used to take you off and round to the town, but that's for the story. But again, you can see what used to be the platform, and you can see the weathering and things, and these all come together as part of the story. Again, as a standalone photo, not very good. As a group of photos which tells you something, it's ideal for what I wanted. Now, I can't actually remember what I put into these. Ah, yes. Again, flicking through, this is another video I've done recently. This is called a thing called the Witch's Hat in Brampton, or colloquially is known as Witch's Hat. It's a folly, and I did a bit of research. One of the things I enjoy doing when I'm doing photographs is research. So this was taken in the snow. You can actually see some snow falling, but it was a shot. I've done a whole series of these shots in different weathers at different times of day, and I'd used a speed light in the background to illuminate the inside. But you mentioned something about a bird landing on the water earlier. I was just about to do this shot. I was freezing cold. My hands were unbelievably cold, and just as I was about to do it, this was about an hour earlier than this particular shot was taken, by the way, but it was going to be this shot about an hour earlier, and a woman came to the side, looked at me, and walked straight across and left a wonderful trail of footprints in the snow. Thank you. I'll not tell you what I was thinking about at the time, but again, like that bird, it just ruined the shot. So I ended up waiting for a little while until the snow fell again, another snow shower, and then the snow shower stopped, went in to get that shot. And again, telling a story, this has been part of a series. There's the inside of it. It was actually a building built for the ninth Earl of Carlisle for his wife, and there's a whole story behind it. It was built in the 30s, and it's actually a gin house. And again, with the story, a gin house, it's nothing to do with drinks. She was actually teetotal and very against alcohol, but gin in this case is an abbreviation of engine, and the engine in this case was a horse, because you had a horse which would walk around the center of a proper gin house. This is a folly done to that, which would turn a shaft, which would turn a millstone, and there's a millstone up on top of it. So it's all that. This one's shot a couple of years ago at night, and it's one of my favorite photos.
Is this the one Sue doesn't like?
It's the one my wife doesn't like, and quite a few people don't like it, but there are some people who literally fall in love with it.
Like I love it. I love it.
Different sort of viewpoint. The last one, I waited 3 years to find snow, because we normally get snow here and didn't for 3 years. But the last one I got with the snow. This one was a couple of years ago, and I've had daytime shots, and they create a series. Final couple of photos, and again, we're looking at what we've got insofar as rules. We've got leading lines, we've got perspective, converging parallels. This is Lamley Viaduct, again, not far away from where I live. Railway viaduct, which feeds onto the line that we've just seen Brampton Station on. It's now a country walk, but we can see there and on the next couple of shots just what you can do by using.
Oh, I was just going to say, can I make an observation? So those lines are really annoying me because the front of the line curves.
Yep.
I think if you'd taken 2 or 3 steps forward, I can't judge the distance, to where the line straightens out and taken it, I don't think that would annoy me as much. But that bendy line, and it's only the one, isn't it? Is that the left-hand line is quite bent.
It's interesting you say that, because I actually took the other one and found it bland, so I came back because I wanted something which would draw me into it. Wonderful. Yeah, that shows that there isn't an ideal right and wrong way as well, which is superb. But yes, shows you parallel lines, it shows you converging parallels. Before I go over that, I had to shoot with a fairly small aperture because I actually wanted as much of it in focus as possible. I wanted a really long depth of field. So where you went for a short one before, I wanted almost everything to be in focus.
So did you have a high f-stop?
I think it was shot at about f11.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's lovely. I like that. I like
again showing the wind of the river. We've got the line drawing us now through, and it's taken us to a point round about the upper 2/3. Starts from the center, takes us to a third line and a back. And again, when you analyze it, this is what you see. I didn't stand there on the bridge and think that. I thought, oh, that looks quite nice. So we took that, but again, it does draw it in, and we got the nice warmth in the right-hand side for those bright greens on the fields. Perspective, and again, we're going to be covering these in different videos. I've quite heavily altered this by putting a lot of clarity onto it, which really brings out the texture of the brick. It's something that's my style, I quite like doing. But you'll get people saying about lens flare. Oh, lens flare's ruined this or ruined that. I actually deliberately wanted that lens flare.
What's lens flare? Is that the starburst?
That's where you get the starburst from the bridge, but also you see that there's sort of some rainbow colors. Purple is almost like a red tick. Lens flare, when you don't want it, can be a real pain. You'll get these the little orbs that people talk about. You can see the little circles on the middle pillar there, little orbs of light. Very, very prominent on mobile phones, that you get those sort of things where you get lens flare. And what it is, it's the light coming in to the lens and refracting, bending as it comes in. However, to me, that shot, if it didn't have the lens flare on, would be a little bit bland. With the lens flare, which I actually walked backwards, I was almost off the bridge to be able to get the right place. I wanted it just over the top of the parapet of the top line of the viaduct. But what it does for me is it creates a bit of a sparkle in the whole shot. And again, by upping the clarity, has really brought the texture of the stonework out. And again, we've got all sorts of things going on there of rules, but basically it's a shot I like.
Can we have a look on another video? Can we have a look at the raw footage of that to see, not necessarily raw as in RAW, but before?
I can, before, yeah, I can do
pre-production.
I can certainly do that, not a problem. Remind me when we come off air.
Will do.
Another shot of the viaduct, get very, very different. The sun's in a different place. The sun's I'm on the opposite side of the viaduct to where I was before. I've come across. But again, with this one, I wanted to show the viaduct disappearing in the distance. What they call compression as well. We've talked about, we hit on the compression, but by using a fairly telephoto lens on there, not particularly wide angle, and being quite an acute angle, can you see how really the bridge, it doesn't appear to be long, but it disappears quickly. All those arches seem to be very close together, and we've compressed that distance in. And using a telephoto, a longer lens towards the zoom end of your lens will cause that compression. And again, a very wide aperture. Again, I think about f11, because I wanted almost everything to be in focus. And again, in post-production, if you saw the original on this one, you'd be amazed. It is almost black on the right-hand side, and almost burned out in the highlights. So again, post-production has allowed us to bring out the brickwork on the right, which you wouldn't see, and to control the light. So we do an awful lot with it. That's what we call, that's the difference on when we're talking about dynamic range. We're looking at what we can see between light and dark.
Are we going to do a video on post-production at some point?
In the future, we will, yeah, definitely, because it's a very important part of it. We said about, I'm flying through these because really I wanted to see your photographs, but it's just to give you an idea what I was doing. We talked about shutter speed, high shutter speeds to capture your train. We said about using a slow shutter speed or a moderate shutter speed so you could see the trees moving. Well, this is the opposite. This was me handheld, what I had to do to try and do it. I think it's about a quarter of a second. Yeah, I think it was certainly under a second. It may have been a second, but I think it was a quarter or half a second. I braced myself against a tree to handhold it, so the camera's held there tight, because I wanted the trees to be sharp and in focus. But by having a very slow shutter speed on the water, you can see how it's caused that almost creaminess on the water. And that was what I wanted to have. But to make it, if I hadn't braced the camera, I would have just had motion blur, so the whole lot would have been out. So to get that, either use a tripod or really brace the camera so it's solid and you can't move, get your breathing right, click it. But the slow shutter speed has allowed the water to carry on moving, to become blurred, but I've managed to keep the rest in focus. That was done without a tripod, literally just leaning against the tree.
It's lovely. I like that.
So it's the opposite side of what you wanted from the train and the car. So again, which is right. It's right for whatever it is. And it's just that application of the technical side. Again, form factor, we said about trees. I'm just going to flip through that, but I love that tree because I just love the shape of it. Last couple I'm going to show you is taking it beyond the standard. And again, this is either post-production or it can be done in the camera. There's that same shot of the viaduct, but put into quite a high contrast black and white. And it's a total different view. It's a totally, you know, if you hadn't seen the other one first, you wouldn't realize it was the same.
It's quite haunting.
It's very haunting. It's incredible. High contrast, not necessarily a shot I like, but it really shows the difference. And it really brings the texture of those bricks out. And really, it's a different scene altogether. And this could be done inside your camera. Your camera, without having to put it post-production, can do this on a JPEG by doing the styles. Have a look in the instructions how to change the styles. Very, very easy. But that sort of thing can be done in camera. The other one is again on top. And rather than do a very high contrast, I've done a sepia tone on that one to give a little bit of the historic feel. We said about historic things. Well, that's a little bit more of a historic photograph. Again, using perspective, again, quite a long depth of field, but because we're so close to that barrier when we took it, we can't stop the beginning being out of focus. And I focused on the second ball down, the second unit down there. But again, because it's got a deep depth of field, the rest is all in focus. And again, we've got perspective, we've got leading lines, all sorts of things, and distortion. Because we can see that because of that converging parallels, that tube is not a tube. It is it's almost triangular, very shallow triangle, because of the fact that the top is shallower than the bottom. So we've got distortion coming into that. So that's what I would say on this. I think we've got a really good session out of that, because what I think we've learned is that, yes, we need that technology. We need to have an understanding how it works to apply it on the things, but at the end of the day, it's what we're doing and why we're doing it is the more important thing. I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, I think the very reason I wanted to do this and get into photography, as we said in the very, very first video, was to get me out, get me exercising, get me a bit more mindful about what was around me. And I have to say, when I go out now, I don't know if I've got it with me. I bought myself a nice camera bag, but actually I have a backpack, and I just shoved my camera in because I found the other ones that went over my shoulder, and I take it with me most places. Yeah, and what it's making me do when I'm out now is to actually slow down, and not necessarily slow down my walking, but slow down my brain and look around more. What is there to take? So. And I think that there's another thing that I've discovered as well, is that I just take lots, and you said this on quite a few of the sessions we've done. You know, photography is a really, notwithstanding the cost of the equipment, it's a really cheap hobby once you've got the equipment, because you can take hundreds of photographs and play. And of course, if we were buying film and having to get it processed, it would have cost a fortune. You would have been more careful. So it's a really good opportunity. I'm loving the fact that I can just play. And what I'm also finding, I don't know if I've answered your question, but what I'm also finding is you think you've done something in the photograph, and then you get back and you upload it onto the computer and you look at it on a bigger screen, and you see so much more than you realized when you were taking it. Some of it good, some of it bad, but it's like a second voyage of discovery. So you've got that initial voyage of discovery when you're out there taking the photographs, and then you get home, upload them, and you've got this second sort of curiosity that happens. And I'm just finding I love it.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to stop this video on, because I mean that sums up everything that photography for somebody who isn't doing it as a profession should be about. Challenge for next time is pretty much the same, but what I would like you to do, I would like you to do a little bit of research on the rule of thirds, and I would like you to take again some photographs, anything you want to, but I would like you to bring them back and have I'm not interested in the f-stops particularly, I'm not interested in the speeds. I think we've proved that that's gone in there. I need to know what you saw and how it fits in with this rule of thirds, and we'll go to that. And next time we're going to cover several of the rules, but if you just do the rule of thirds, it's a really good way to get into it.
Sorry, let me recap. So research the rule of thirds, so what it actually means and where you apply it, and then go out and apply it and tell you why I applied it. Is that what you're asking?
How it fits on that photograph, or if it fits on that photograph, because you may choose not to follow the rule of thirds, and that's an interesting thing, is the choice.
Okay.
But just again, take as many photographs you want. Bring me 4 or 5 next time, and we'll go through them. Before we finish this video, again, just as I normally say, give us a subscribe if you can. There's a little button underneath, and or if you want notifications of every time we upload one of these videos, hit the notification bell. And even more important for us, give me a thumbs up, because what the thumbs up does is it tells YouTube to actually distribute it further, let more people see this, because if you have learned one thing in these 5 videos about how photography works, then I think Bev and I have both achieved our goal, really, haven't we? It's so if you've enjoyed anything like that, there's a whole series of videos out there, but we're trying to do this to make this so that it's straightforward and accessible. It shouldn't be rocket science.
Yeah, it's for me, it was, before we started this, I literally got my camera at Christmas. We're now the 21st of March, so it's only been a couple of months. But over the Christmas period, I started trying to research beginners photography on YouTube, and even the very basic ones were starting at a level that was more advanced than I was. I literally didn't have a clue, and I needed the step before that. Which is what I'm hoping that we're bringing to people who are watching this, is the step before, the beginner step, because there's lots of YouTube videos that call themselves a beginner's guide to SLR photography or digital photography, but there's an expectation of a level of understanding and knowledge that I didn't have, and I'm guessing other people don't have either.
Well, that's been my intention, to try and pass it on to you, because once you've got over those initial thresholds, everything becomes much more fun, much more plain sailing, and you never look back. So until the next time we see you online, thanks very much for watching this. Bye-bye from me, and bye-bye from me. Yeah, see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Bye.